Welcome to another podcast, Backyard Millionaire Style podcast number 5, and it's working with your spouse or significant other.
This is a good one. This is the one.
Timely. Some people say that it's an impossible thing to do, work with your spouse, and it leads to the detriment of your marriage. We've heard that a million times, right?
Absolutely. We've had many people look at us and kind of shake their heads and kind of look at us with this little weird stare like, really? How's that going?
And they're like, how are you still married? And we're like, we don't know. I'm just kidding.
Oh, we have our little battles here and there. But.
Yeah. So basically, go ahead, Chris. What were you going to say?
Well, obviously, this is a big topic because a lot of people, when you're starting off your business or starting off in that entrepreneur field or whatever the direction you're going, you start thinking, you're like, oh, I can do this with my wife or my husband. And you really have to start thinking about that really serious because...
And people do because they think, okay, it's really difficult to help people or
right.
to trust people. Sorry.
Right, yeah.
Trust people when you're working on your idea, and the only other person that knows as much about your idea as you do is the people that you spend your most time with,
right.
Typically your spouse. So we've actually talked to this with a couple of people that we have tried to help, and they are not working with their spouse. Even if you're not, they're still going to be involved as an entrepreneur with your business, right?
You're still going to have to work one way or another and know the boundaries that you have set with your spouse. So, like Jen just said, it's not that person might not be 100% quote unquote a 50% business partner on your venture, but they're also going to be the person that's going to be there, that's going to be supportive to you and giving you advice and being able to tell you how to help. So you always got to be listening to that because they're there for the best goal, which is the family, and it's the family nucleus of building something.
Well, so how are we going to tell people, let's see, that what they really want to know is how, if they want to work with their spouse as far as the 50% partnership in a new idea that they have or business that they're going to start up, how are we going to tell them that they're going to make it work? Let's go with...
Think really serious before you commit. No, I'm just kidding.
Don't do it. No. Let's do it. Okay, so the number one, and I really feel like this is the number one thing, is make an attempt to respect the positions that you set at the beginning.
Correct.
And one of the things that we realized relatively quickly when we, even though we'd been in business together for, 12 years, and somebody said, well, who's the CEO?
Right.
And we were like, oh, I don't know. We don't know who's really in charge. And that's a problem. So you really need to know who is the CEO and respect that position. So who is the CEO, Chris?
I don't know. It depends on what day it is, right? It depends on... No, we have a very good understanding of knowing how we continue to run all of our businesses, that, we definitely are both CEOs, but at the same time, Jen is the CEO. She is the chief, and I try to respect that position as best as I possibly can. And sometimes it's so difficult.
Right.
But I think that we both know that there are, those are the paths. So way we do it is I'm the chief operation officer. So the COO falls onto me and my responsibilities of making sure the operations are going, all the things that make the business heartbeat beat. But the executive, the CEO, which is you, is basically on really what that heartbeat is. What's the blood that's flowing?
Make it work?
Exactly.
The creative and staying within brand guidelines and making sure that everything that Chris comes up with goes into what we're doing, or all the operational side of what we're doing works with what our vision is, I guess.
Correct.
Is what we would say. So sometimes it really is a natural division. If you're lucky enough to have it be a natural division, that's a perfect partnership, because the why we work so well together, people will ask, is because we do have natural divisions of talent. What I'm good at, he's not. I think so.
I think we do. I think
so. What I do well, he doesn't do as well, and vice versa. So that really helps.
I do everything very well.
No, I'm perfect.
But you know what? This was something that we brought up with a lot of different of our franchisees, as well as our other businesses that we've dealt with. Is, when we first opened, even our small little gym, the My House Fitness, our first location, we just instinctively did things. We didn't even really sit down and go, hey, Jen, you do this and I'll do that. No, we just instinctively divided and then conquered. And then we would step over each other every once in a while to make, some decisions. But reality is when we started crossing those paths, that's when we really had to sit down and have an intervention with each other.
Well, because the problem really lies in when you don't have clear divisions, then everything is being attempted to get done and nothing gets done.
Correct.
So
you're spinning your wheels.
You're spinning your wheels, and so you have to have you're doing this and I'm doing this division. So that's super important. So making sure that you know who who the chief's going to be, what the natural divisions of talent are. You figure those out and then divide them and drive in your own lane. You still have to make discussions. You're still going to discuss things with each other. I mean, that's the most important thing. You're going to talk to each other before you make major decisions.
I look at running our business together almost like our household. There's a household budget that I think every household has. It's kind of like you hit that little cusp and you're like, I need to talk to my significant other.
Right.
And it's the same principle even in the business where there's certain thresholds where we're kind of say, we need to sit down and make those types of decisions. If it's an everyday type of COO position decision or a CEO, then we just go with it and we both know that it's for the greater good.
Right.
So that's something to always
You have to have confidence in your role.
Absolutely.
Because you can't be afraid to make decisions, which we talked about on another podcast.
Right.
If you're fearful of making decisions, then maybe you're not in the right role.
Correct.
That you should be in. Also bringing in somebody else. So you think another important thing is bringing someone else in to advise you. For us, we utilize our pastor a lot of the time. Somebody else that comes in and says, hey, you know what, you're making
you're wrong,
or you're right, or whatever it may be. So having someone that you trust to be, or having an advisory board, the bigger your company gets, is super important.
When you start really making those types of decisions that could influence the direction of your business, you absolutely have to go to different entrepreneurs and other advisors, and it doesn't have to be a quote unquote advisory board of 6, 7, 8 people, but I think it's always like that confidant, that person that's maybe been in those shoes one time or another that you trust. Those are the people that are going to really look at both sides and kind of be able to say, hey, this is where I see some good from what she's talking about or he's talking about or whatever, where you guys can actually be on the same page.
So basically, so far, we've gone through knowing who the chief is, right?
Yep.
We've gone through making sure that you're talking decisions. You stay in your lane, but you also have decisions to make together. So you communicate in that way without the big decisions being made without talking to the other person.
Correct, yes.
Getting an advisor to come in and make sure that neither one of you is out of line, or who maybe is the person that is correct, maybe. I don't know, something like that. So the next thing, what would you say the next most important thing is?
Well, obviously, trying to turn it off when you need to turn it off.
And who does a better job of that?
I would say you do.
Really? I was going to say you do.
Oh, well, I mean,
I don't think I do. You're pretty good at turning it off.
I would say I try to do a really good job where, wherever I'm coming in from, the world headquarters.
Wait, when you say turn it off, are you telling to people, turn it off like don't work anymore at night, or turn it off like don't let the problems of the day inflict on our marriage?
Both. No, yeah. I would say...
I would say you do a better job of not letting the business issues affect our marriage, and I do a better job of not working when we're supposed to have family time.
Well, yes, I would say you're absolutely right. I've done a better job. I try to. Us guys, we just want to conquer. We're out there trying to conquer it. But what we're trying to do, what I do, is I like to come home. I also like to just turn it off. I do know that there is some family time, and there are times absolutely that I am working throughout family time as well. I think we're all guilty at some point or another. But I try to definitely turn it off. Whereas then when the kids go to bed, then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I'm turning this back on. I know there's about, an hour or two more stuff that I can at least get done. I call it fishing. I'm fishing, so I'm fishing, throwing out all my lures out there in the early evening. So by the morning time, I'm reeling everything back in. So that's kind of like my philosophy.
Turning it off.
Yeah, turning it off. Yeah, but I'm not perfect at it by any means. I mean,
so what's the guidelines for turning it off for these people?
Well, I think relationship wise, because we're talking about working with your spouse. I say when you're trying to turn it off, it's kind of like you can't have business discussions with your significant other, your spouse that's involved in it. It's going to happen because this is part of your life, But at the end of the day, you have to be able to turn it off and say, okay, I'm going to be husband Chris now, and I'm going to do my best I possibly can. I am not perfect by any means, but that is what I say about turning it off.
Right. So the other thing that I was bringing up about turning it off is making sure that he does a good job of, which I don't as much, but I work on, is not letting the arguments of the business day
Oh yeah.
go into the bedroom if you want to say, because I'm still upset about the business, something that happened, and he's like, just shut it off, but I don't.
Well,
so
I think
those
we
are
all,
two different things to shut off. So one is if we're helping them, one is when you are at home, you need to set boundaries for when you're not going to let work come into the dinner time conversations with your family, the bedtime, making sure you're not just ignoring your family. The other thing would be when you go out on a date night with your spouse, don't talk about the business for a certain amount of time. Mm-hmm. If you're working with your spouse, that's going to be hard to do, because clearly as entrepreneurs, we both enjoy talking about our business, and we talk about it 24 hours a day. But at least say for the first hour of this date, we're not going to talk about the business. And then if you both want to later, that's a boundary you have to set. That's fine. But not always having outsourced things when you go on a date night with your spouse, if you're working together, not just talk about the business. Find other things to talk about.
That does help, yes.
So those would be the two things. Don't take it into the bedroom. Leave the disagreements of the business at work. And then, again, don't always just talk about work. But that's what you would say?
Absolutely.
All right, so what's another thing? Oh, this is a really good one I just thought of.
What's that?
If you realizing that your team members were not at your meeting. This was an issue with us. We have a big problem with our team members. We have a lot of meetings with each other, and at midnight or at lunch at home or whatever it might be, our team members weren't there. So,
and we just assume, we're like, oh, yeah.
We were there. No. So communicating
to your team members, your employees, your team. They were not there at that 11 p.m. meeting where we made a decision, and that is a hard one. It's a hard one because I think that a lot of times
you make a decision, you move on with it.
You move on, and there's a little bit of an assumption. There's a little bit of you just think, well, we know about it. Why does anybody else? So it's the communicating. You have to communicate. So it's not just about communicating to yourselves and your spouse, but it's also making sure everybody's on the same team. And it doesn't have to be meetings about having meetings and be corporate, but you do have to respect the fact that the communicating to your employees is what keeps those employees in the know to make them do what you're wanting them to do. So good communication with your employees is very much a key thing.
I think another good one is like taking it out to your shed, right? Or if you don't have a shed, you need to have a space in your home that is for business only. So don't let the business space bleed out into the living room and other areas of your house, because that's what leads to working 24 hours a day and not separating it out. And the kids don't, and then you get upset with the kids, or if you don't have kids, you get upset with your spouse because it's a constant work conversation.
Right. Yeah.
So having a space, right?
Regardless of the size, regardless of your size of your home or where you're at, you have to designate a certain time, space, and time.
Right.
And it's where everybody's on the same page. Mommy and daddy are working from this time to this time, or whatever. But those are things that when you really start designating it, then I think you become more organized.
More efficient.
You're going to become more efficient, and then you can actually turn it off when you do come, quote unquote, from that loft or basement area. You can shut the door and say, I'm done. Today's the day. I'm done. I'm going to be Family Guy now, and I can come back to it later. But right now, I'm turning it off.
What about those listeners that we have out there that are working a full-time job and also creating their new business like a lot of people do? Then what are their boundaries for working with a spouse or family time?
Well, it's going to be the same thing,
Or me time. We forget about me time.
Yeah.
That's important too. What's that? I forgot about that.
Well, I think, me time is going to be one of those things you have to start factoring in. If that me time is going to the gym, playing, going and hitting some golf balls, or, whatever, if I like triathlon, get out on a bike or going out on a run, those types of things. So those are factors.
If you have a full-time job.
Well, if you have a full-time job, obviously you're going to have to get to the point where you're going to have to say, here's my time frame, and these are the amount of times that I'm going to put devoted into my new adventure.
Setting goals.
It's setting goals. It's a project. Taking anything from zero, like our other podcasts, it is not easy, but it is hard work and hustle. And if you're dedicated to do it, then yes, being able to communicate that with your spouse to say, this is what I'm going to do, and this is going to be the time frame that I'm going to do it. So
I think also too, if you have a job that's a very high-powered, stressful job, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to start a business. So maybe getting a job that pays the bills but doesn't cause you to use too much brain power from 9 to 5, that you can put more into after the kids go to bed or designated hours at night when your spouse agrees to, helps.
There was one time when I was getting my contractor's license, and it was Jen knew. I was like, hey, I'm disappearing. I'm going to have 2 weeks of just nonstop head in a book. I am not going to be lovely, fun Chris. It's going to be nothing but studious, just consuming as much as I can. And that's where the communication comes in. As long as everybody's on the same page, then it's not a big deal. But the minute you guys get off the page, or anybody gets off the page, then it becomes an issue.
And that really comes down to, again, communicating is huge. I think that making sure that you communicate with people. We've had the issue in our marriage, in our
we are so perfect,
in
baby.
Our work life. Communication. That's been a big lesson, I think, to be learned, is that as long as you're communicating in all these areas that we've talked about, your life is going to be a lot easier. And one of the things that when we talk about books to read that I think help in that area, one of the books that really has helped me in this area is called The 4 Agreements. The 4 Agreements, we'll put a link on the website, Miguel Ruiz. And the 4 agreements are, 1, be impeccable with your word. So that's basically just saying, say what you mean what you say, do what you say. Mm-hmm. If you you cannot overcommit yourself, as an example of where out of all of the 4 agreements that I'm going to tell you, this is the hardest one for me, is I'm a yes person. So I can't be impeccable with my word if I'm saying yes to everyone when I know I'm not going to make it. If 4 people called me yesterday and said, hey, let's go to the movies tomorrow, I'm like, yeah. And then the next person says, hey, let's go to hang at the pool later. Absolutely. Hey, do you want to go to the mall? I do, because I want to do all those things. But the problem is, all of those people, only one of them is not going to get their feelings hurt. Even though I want to do it. My friends will tell you that.
I'm usually in the background shaking my head, going,
how are you committing?
What are you saying? Stop.
And then I have to work, so I can't do any of them.
Yeah.
So being impeccable with your word, it doesn't mean don't be a liar. Of course, we don't want you to be a liar. But it means only say yes to the things you know you're going to be able to do. And be okay with saying no. I'm not going to be able to get that done tomorrow because I have this, and that.
Right.
That's going to help with your spouse, your family life, friends, work, everything. The second agreement is don't take anything personally. This goes into work life.
It's so hard.
Sometimes when you're in a bad mood with something that happened with work, especially when you work with your spouse or with your family members, friends, it's very easy to be snappy or upset, money problems, all kinds of things can happen.
I think that's the one you're telling me that I'm so good at, because I don't.
You
don't take anything personal in the business. The minute I go home, it's like the old school guys, the guys used to get into fights, and then the next day we're best friends. It's kind of like that. So absolutely.
The next one would be don't make assumptions. So this is a bit huge one. If you have a question or concern about the way your spouse did something or reacted, ask a question. Don't assume the reasoning behind it. And that's huge when it comes to the business world, especially with working with your spouse. So don't assume.
It's like the mind ninja. I forget, there was a comedian that said it. Remember that back in the day when they said it was like they would just drop that like mind bomb on somebody, and it's like assumption city. You're in there going, did they mean this? They didn't mean that?
Well, you have to have the courage.
What did that? Why they say it that way?
Right.
So,
You have to have the courage to ask questions, because communicating really saves you from misunderstandings, drama. It's a total life transformation, not making assumptions. So
absolutely.
That's huge. The last one is always do your best. That means no matter how you are feeling that day, your best today is not going to be the same as your best tomorrow. So just doing your best every day, that saves a lot of stress and a lot of problems, because if you are feeling down about yourself or the way you are that day and you're feeling not as up to par, doesn't mean you don't work hard. It just means the hard work you're going to put in today won't be the same as tomorrow. So that's a really great book. Another thought about this, so before we wrap it up, what do you think?
Well,
another great point.
Well, one good point that I've been really incorporating a lot, and Jen will shake her head, is always saying same team. you know, and it's a team. You know, us guys, we like to bring up the sports analogy all the time, but it really,
we're going to talk about sportsing now.
Oh, the podcast about sports. No, it's like a baseball. You know, just like baseball is like one of those games you either like it or you don't. But at the end of the day, really, you can have one of the best hitters in all of baseball in the major leagues, and then the coach looks at him and says, "I need you to bunt. I need you to bunt because it's for the team, to help the team win." And that's where you have to think about that. You know, are we on the same team? Are we trying to accomplish the same goals? And when you guys
it's sacrifice.
It's sacrifice, and it's sometimes thinking your idea is better than your spouse's, and guess what? Your spouse trumps you because you're gonna see it as a team to say, look, let's make sure that we're doing the best we can. So that's a good one that we've been really talking a lot more about.
Don't you think
that the last year?
The reason, yeah, absolutely, and I think the reason why we've been getting better at that, I feel, really has to do with our faith and the spiritual leaders that we have in our life that we know are praying for us, and also they give us good guidance. And when you take selfishness out and replace it with love, and that's not to be cheesy, that's just true.
It's true, yeah.
You do see a difference when it comes to knowing who the Chiefs are, putting it with staying in your lane, not feeling that you need to be selfish, and trusting your spouse's decisions or your decisions that you're making for the greater good of the business, for your family life, whatever that may be. And that truly does come back to that, don't you think?
It absolutely does. You know, I've said it, and Jen and I are both know it. You know, every morning we have somebody that's praying for us. You know, we have somebody, a whole church that's praying for our success and for our guidance, and we are too. So, you know, that's a very big one too. You know, being married and have that significant other a part of your business journey, that is huge, and it's a responsibility that can truly, like a lot of people say, it could really be Splitsville for some people because they just can't handle it. But I think that it always comes down to all those things that we just talked about. You know, having a good faith, having great communication, understanding you're on the same team, respecting the other ones. You know, and believe me, Jen and I are not perfect. Are we perfect? No.
Well, I am almost perfect.
You're close. You are. You tell me that all the time, but no, I'm just kidding. No, it is one of those things that we know we can do so much better in a lot of these areas all the time, because you're going to be good at one and then the other one is going to slip, and that's where, when you're doing this and starting a business is fun. It really is. It's stressful, it's hard work, it's grit, but you have a vision that you're going to get there to that end point together. And when you can do that and say it's together and it's for the family and for the common goal, then you're going to be very successful.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us today. Hopefully this will either lead you to know that you can work with your spouse or make you realize not a great idea for you, which is fine. You know what I mean? It's not good for everybody.
It is what it is, but absolutely it is a fun journey that I get to see my beautiful wife every single day, and pretty much I would say about 90% of the day. So it is a good thing.
It is a good thing.
Yeah,
all right, guys, we look forward to talking to you next time on Backyard Millionaires.